Hey gang, it's Squill, and welcome to my top 10 Steven Universe Season 2 episodes. This was actually a pretty tough list. I ended up switching episodes around quite a bit. What can I say, Season 2 just has so many bangers. My list will probably look different from the average SU fan, so just keep in mind that a lot of these episodes were very close together. And with that, let's get on with the list. At number 10, we have Log Day 7152. While kinda weird as a season finale, Log Day acts as a perfect bookend to Peridot's character arc throughout the last chunk of Season 2. I really like the slice-of-life approach they took with this episode, watching Peridot slowly come to grips with Earth's culture. There's some great comedy here, with Peridot not understanding the "why did the chicken cross the road" joke, and her complete hyperfixation over campaigning hearts. Though considering how obsessive I can get over Adventure Time, this bit may have hit a bit too close to home for me. I really like the narrative through line of this episode, with Garnet and Peridot's relationship. Peridot and Garnet being basically polar opposites from each other makes them such a fun duo. I wish we got to see them interact more throughout the series. As cool as it would be to see Peridot fuse with Garnet or basically anyone, I respect the show's commitment to Peridot being basically asexual. It's cool that the show has Peridot learning to respect Garnet's identity as a fusion without actually liking fusion itself. A very charming episode all around, and wraps Peridot's arc up in a nice bow. At number 9, we have Nightmare Hospital. Nightmare Hospital is an episode that nails its atmosphere. Even before the freaky gem experiments show up, there's just something so eerie about this big, empty hospital. I guess hospitals are already not the most pleasant place to be, but they do a good job making it feel so alien, and that feeling is heightened when the gem experiments show up. Some of these scenes feel straight out of a horror movie or video game, they're so good. I quite like the arc they gave Connie and her mom in this episode too. It's another great example of most problems being solved simply by direct communication. Dr. Maheshwaran is definitely strict on Connie, but it still comes from a place of love and care. I also love her utter shock upon discovering Connie's secret double life. I also love this little Steven moment at the end of the episode, with him hugging Rose's sword. It's a nice early glimpse of Steven's complicated feelings towards Rose that will become more prevalent in later seasons. Nightmare Hospital is a great horror episode, while also being a very strong Connie episode. At number 8, we have Too Far. I really love just how low the stakes are to Too Far. It's just this intimate little character story about Peridot and Amethyst. Peridot's weird descriptions for things are very amusing. I think the way she describes Steven is what gets me the most. She really just digs into the poor kid, it's so funny. And I really like the way this is juxtaposed against the way Peridot describes Amethyst. The way Amethyst gets more visibly uncomfortable the more Peridot opens up her vulnerabilities. You can make the argument that Amethyst is a bit unlikable here, laughing at other people's expense but turning around once the jokes are on her. But I'd argue it's justified given how much more personal Peridot's descriptions of Amethyst are compared to the other gems. At the same time, I like that Peridot isn't really a bad player here either. She just has a hard time understanding other people's emotions and drawing a line between what is and isn't okay to joke about. A struggle that I'm sure many people can relate to. I love how sincere Peridot's apology feels here, still very flawed, but it clearly comes from a place of her wanting to be better. Too Far is a great episode for Peridot's character development, and one of the best episodes in the Barn arc. At number 7, we have Keeping It Together. I really love how mundane this episode starts out as. The first half of the story does a good job tricking us into thinking it's just another gems chasing after Peridot episode. Only for the story to sideswipe us with some of the most disturbing visuals in the entire series. I really love how much the sight of these forced gem fusions breaks Garnet, almost literally. This is really one of our first times seeing Garnet in a more vulnerable position, where the show drops her cool and collected persona. It's kinda alarming to see Garnet so mortified by something. Fusion is clearly something so sacred to her, that the thought of a gem being forced into it without their consent paralyzes her. This episode uses Steven well too, as the audience stand-in type character. Seeing Garnet so paralyzed disturbs him just as much as it disturbs us. I really love this moment here of Ruby and Sapphire talking to each other through Garnet. The two are usually so in sync with each other that we don't get moments like this. It does a great job foreshadowing them splitting apart later on in Keystone Motel. Keeping It Together is another great horror episode, as well as a fantastic Garnet episode. At number 6, we have The Answer. The Answer is such a charming episode. This isn't our first time seeing Ruby and Sapphire, but it is the episode where we understand why these two are so perfect for each other. Ruby's strong emotionality balances out Sapphire's collected coolness perfectly. Ruby is the exact person that Sapphire needs to literally push her out of her comfort zone, and Sapphire helps keep Ruby emotionally grounded. These two are seriously adorable together. From their little song to them trying to figure out fusion as Garnet, it's always a treat to see these two. On top of that, this is also a very visually impressive episode. I really like the sort of stage play aesthetic the episode takes on during the scenes in Homeworld. And this forest backdrop during the musical number is absolute eye candy. The Answer is a nice, intimate story about two people who change the trajectory of each other's lives, and for that reason I consider it one of Season 2's best. At number 5, we have Keystone Motel. Well, we discussed the episode where Ruby and Sapphire were brought together, now it's time for the one where they're torn apart. What I like about Keystone Motel is that neither Ruby nor Sapphire are really in the wrong here. Ruby is valid in feeling angry at what Pearl did to them, whereas Sapphire is valid in just wanting it to blow over. The only thing that either of them do wrong is when they assume that the other is over or underreacting. And the conflict is only solved once the two properly communicate their feelings to each other without invalidating the others. But on top of the strong emotional moments, this is also a pretty funny episode as well. Ruby and Sapphire each get their good bits, with Ruby in particular being very funny. But it's Greg who comedically steals the show in this one. I can't tell which line is funnier, his awkward "who wants to go on a road trip?" or him telling Steven to call the police. But I also really like Greg's role in this episode as someone for Steven to consult with outside of the conflict. The scene between the two in the RV is very sweet. Keystone Motel is a very strong, emotionally driven episode and a great way to kick off the top 5. At number 4, we have When It Rains. So this is probably not one y'all were expecting to be so high. But what can I say, When It Rains is just a great and underrated episode. I love the Steven and Peridot dynamic here, particularly in the first half of the episode. Peridot's hyper-intelligent mind contrasts against Steven's childlike view of the world perfectly. It makes for some good comedy, but also some moments that are just very sweet. Steven introducing Peridot to Rain is so adorable. Love this shot right here of Peridot. Something about characters being introduced to the rain for the first time always gets me. I guess it just puts into perspective how beautiful our world really is. And I like that this is what causes Peridot to let her guard down a little. The second half of this episode in the kindergarten is also very strong. We get some more charming Steven and Peridot interactions, we learn about the cluster, and get some good action. I really like the way this episode puts Peridot on a path to redemption without just flat out making her a crystal gem here and now. It's the first small baby step towards Peridot's redemption. Speaking of which, at number 3 we have Message Received. I really love the way Message Received toys with the audience. We've really grown to care about Peridot over the course of the season and want to see her do the right thing. But of course, she's still very much loyal to the diamonds. They do a good job tricking us into thinking that Peridot has fallen back into her old ways. We really feel Steven's disappointment here. But then the episode turns it around on us and has Peridot tell Yellow Diamond they need to terminate the cluster. Yellow Diamond herself makes for a fantastic first impression. She feels so high and mighty compared to the gems, a very intimidating presence. It feels like she could squash Peridot in a millisecond just for questioning her, which makes Peridot standing against her all the more impactful. Yellow's reaction here is so priceless. Message Received gives us one of Peridot's best moments in the entire series, and acts as a great finale to her redemption arc. At number 2, we have Sworn to the Sword. Yup, another fan favorite Pearl grieving over Rose episode only lands at number 2. Makes me wonder where Mr. Greg is gonna end up in next season's top 10 list. Sworn to the Sword is an excellent Pearl and Connie episode. Right off the bat, Do It For Her is one of the best songs in all of Steven Universe. Dee Dee Hall and Grace Rolock both have beautiful singing voices, so hearing them duet is a treat to the ears. I really love Pearl's portrayal in this episode, projecting her own loyalty towards Rose onto Connie's relationship with Steven. Prior to the Sardonyx arc, this is probably the most messed up thing Pearl has ever done, convincing Connie that her life is less valuable in comparison to Steven's. But at the same time, I don't think they go too far in making Pearl unlikable here, since it's clear that this stems from her own feelings towards Rose and her lack of self-worth. But this is also a great Steven and Connie story, about how the two work best when they're on equal footing with each other. Steven's life isn't more or less valuable than Connie's just because he's a gem. This episode also has some really great fight choreography, particularly during the musical number. I really love the ending to this episode too. I like that they give a resolution to this episode's conflict, while making it clear that Pearl still has unhealthy feelings towards her relationship with Rose. Sworn to the Sword is an excellent episode, and much like Rose's Scabbard in the Season 1 list, it came very close to being number 1. There's just one episode this season that I like slightly more, and that episode would be Say Uncle Baby! Introducing Uncle Grandpa to Steven Universe canon is probably the most genius decision the Crewniverse has ever made. Uncle Grandpa is quite possibly the most powerful character in all of fiction. The universe quite literally bends to his will. Those lousy-ass crystal gems think they can protect Steven, but real ones know that Uncle Grandpa's got Steven's back for life. So much so that Steven even activated his shield for the first time to protect his beloved Uncle Grandpa. Not to mention his legendary squad of goons, such as the oh-so-sexy Mr. Gus, the iconic Pizza Steve, who Amethyst killed, and the lovable giant realistic flying tiger. In conclusion, Say Uncle is quite literally peak fiction, and the entire rest of the show is garbage, and here's why: because of Uncle Grandpa's lack of presence. And furthermore, what's that? Say Uncle technically takes place during Season 1 of Steven Universe, and thus is not viable for a top 10 Season 2 list. Son of a b- Well, if I were to pick a runner-up favorite Season 2 episode, that would happen to be We Need to Talk. We Need to Talk is one of the most raw and grounded feeling episodes in all of Steven Universe. It acts as such a perfect follow-up to last season's Story for Steven, where we're seeing Greg try his hardest to relate to an alien such as Rose. There isn't a ton of action here, it's a very character and dialogue-driven story, but that's part of why I love it so much. This episode opens with another one of my all-time favorite Steven Universe songs. This slow duet between Greg and Rose is an absolute earworm, but it's the story that precedes this moment that truly makes this episode one of my favorites. I love how Pearl is the one who initiates the conflict of this episode. Her jealousy towards Greg's relationship with Rose is on full display here, and it's really funny. I like seeing Greg try his hand at fusion here. Modern day Greg usually tries to stay out of gem stuff, but it's cool to see that he wasn't always like that. And it makes for one of my all-time favorite scenes in Steven Universe in the form of this episode's climax. There's something so real feeling about Greg and Rose's conversation here. These two people who are from two entirely different worlds and clearly love each other, but also have a hard time understanding the other. I love the roller coaster of emotions on display here, it's so dynamic. And even though the conversation itself is a little bumpy and awkward, it ends with the two having a better understanding of each other and what they want out of this relationship. We Need to Talk is one of the most adult-feeling episodes in all of Steven Universe, and because of that, it's easily my favorite episode of its second season. Besides Say Uncle, of course. Before we go, here are some quick honorable mentions. Chillited is a fun dream episode that does a good job foreshadowing Lapis' return at the start of Season 3. Cry for Help is an excellent start to the Sardonyx arc and a great exploration of Pearl and Amethyst's insecurities. Sadie-san is a really nice story about Sadie and her mom with an ending that I'm so glad was allowed to air on Cartoon Network. And Steven's Birthday is a fun story that poses some interesting questions about Steven's age. This one would probably land at number 11. Please let me know what your favorite Steven Universe Season 2 episode is and why it's Say Uncle in the comments, and have a good one. Squill out.